your life. You got this. Go chase it, live your life. Enlighten you. Let the light shine through. Let light enlighten you. Just see it through.
I'm Melissa Thrasher.
And I'm Lolita Cummings.
Welcome to Enlighten U, EMU's award-winning mental health podcast for students. Before we begin, we have a gentle message for you. Today's episode includes discussion of sexual assault and trauma. Please take care of yourself and skip this episode if you need to. We want you all to be well.
April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, so we felt it was necessary to create space for honest conversation, awareness, and a survivor-centered story. To help us do that, we're sitting down with Nicole Wood. Nicole is an EMU undergraduate student majoring in clinical laboratory sciences with a concentration as a medical laboratory scientist. Nicole experienced sexual assault while enlisted in the Navy. Today, she's medically retired. Stay with us as Nicole tells her story, her way.
Nicole, welcome to the show. We're so happy that you're here telling your story. And we're also happy that you trust us with your story. And the fact that you have the courage to be so open, you can open up a lot of conversation just sharing your story today. So we applaud you and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. So take us back. I mean, you were enlisted in the Navy. What age did you start the Navy?
I enlisted when I was 18 and I joined when I was 19. I went to boot camp when I was 19.
Wow. Okay. I love it. I love it. My daddy was in the Navy.
And my dad too.
Oh my gosh. So we got, all the stuff. So take us back. What was it like and what did you want to become as a result of being in the Navy?
You know, you go into boot camp, but before you go, you sign up for like your MOS or your job, whichever, the branches have different names for them. But I wanted to be military police, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, so I did. I went to boot camp and then I went to our, what we call our A school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, your training. And I ended up getting injured, so I didn't get to do that. But after I got injured, they basically sent me off to a boat and I got to live on a boat for a while.
Yes. What was that experience like?
Unique. I didn't go on deployment, but I did do like what we call workups, where we take the boat out for like a month and then we come back for a few days. Then we go out for 2 weeks, then we come back. And so it's in and out, in and out, in and out. And I worked night shift when we were out and I worked day shift when we were in. So the adjustment coming in and out of port was unique. Mm-hmm. I was tired, but it was a very, it taught me a lot. Taught me how to work with a lot of different people.
And it teaches you discipline too,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So many. Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you for your support.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your service and for joining us here today. It really does matter. At some point, you were assaulted in there. Where were you? Where were you on the boat? Like what city and town? Were you in the state or where?
The first time I was not. I hadn't made it to the boat yet, and the second time I was on the boat. We were just out. Okay. We didn't go to like ports when we did workups. We just went out into the water far enough where there was no cell service.
Okay. All right. Can you tell us what happened?
I think that's complicated. This is where I really feel strongly that consent can't be persuaded. It's not negotiable, right? I'm a firm believer that if you have to beg or persuade, then it's not consent, right? Because when you corner people like that, they get scared. They don't know what you're capable of. I didn't know what they were capable of. So we were alone in a place where they had authority and I did not. Although I think the discipline is really beneficial, and the regimentation that the military provides, I think that for a while there was this, I don't want to say belief, but like this just idea that we had to follow our our uppers, our chain of command. And when you take advantage of someone when you're in a position of power, it leaves them feeling very kind of helpless. In the military, our chain of command, people above us, they observe us and they do like paperwork that says like how you're doing, how you're performing, et cetera, et cetera. And it becomes unknown territory, right? When they have that level of power to dictate, whether you can rank up or, how your performance is. I think it just muddies the water gets muddy, right? And so sometimes you feel like you have no choice, right? So,
Aisha, I think Nicole's story, it resonates with a lot of us in terms of power dynamics, right? How do we navigate that? How can we, for example, at the university, we have rules about who can have intimate relationships and who can't. I was talking to Dwight Hamilton about this not long ago, and there are so many lines that people don't understand, or they break those lines. How can we lessen some of these incidents, or decrease the number of some of these incidents with this? Because you were powerless, or felt like you were in a lot of this. Would that be accurate? Because especially in the military, where there is a chain of command, where there are expectations that you were going to follow someone else's order. How do we get away from that?
Yeah, it's a complicated thing. So Dwight and his team in the Office of Access and Opportunity had the same page. So he talked about this in our September episode. But what does it look like to establish consent? Consent, if it looks like, hey, I'm okay having this act we can do, or not this act. Or what if somebody says, hey, I would like you to use a condom, and they don't use a condom? They didn't give consent to that. And I think it's important for our viewers to understand that consent looks differently, because sometimes people are like, well, it wasn't like that, and that's the story I hear in the media. But if you felt uneasy about it, like, that's not okay. And with the authority thing, sometimes people are like, but we're the same age, but they're your supervisor. But it's like, well, last year they weren't my supervisor. It's like that can get muddied. And I think, do you feel that your safety, your employment, your education, et cetera, would be jeopardized if you were to say no? And sometimes people are like, well, they weren't like what they think is threatening or whatever. But like, if you start to question that, it doesn't sound like it's like a healthy interaction.
That makes a lot of sense. At some point, like immediately after it happened, did you question yourself of what this was, or you knew immediately that this was a violation?
it was kind of back and forth. Like the whole consent thing, it's like, for me and what I had to go through and my experience in therapy was just that if I say yes up until that moment and then I say no, you don't have consent anymore. Like in the middle of the scenario, if I change my mind, that's it. Like, and so if I change my mind in the middle, but you're not finished and you decide to finish, you've now violated me, right? I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and you were also young. How old were you?
I was 18.
You were 18. Do you think your youth played a part in your confusion or their confusion at that point? Because as an older person, someone who's aged a little bit, those lines are a little bit clearer.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're more vulnerable. Are we more vulnerable when we're younger?
Absolutely.
I was absolutely
Younger, and folks like, in their elderly years of like what seems normal, what doesn't. Because also our culture plays a difference of, I think thankfully younger generations now, consent is more talked about, where it's very like knowing that it's not okay to be like, well, are you sure? Where I feel like cultures, maybe older generations, including mine, it's like this little game and like the movie showed this. And it's like, the youth I know is like, I said no. You know,
As
like
they should.
I was at a kid's birthday party and someone like, I don't know, threw a balloon and they're like, I don't like that. This kid was like 7. And like, that's a thing we talk about with our youth that's just like these normalized. And so I'm like, think it's a positive change in our culture.
Absolutely. Well, again, I applaud you for sharing because I know you're young and, of course, maybe even respected this person at, one point or another because of the ranking. And you touched on having to go through therapy. So I'm sure that this experience had taken a toll on your life. And yeah, it did. So can you talk about how it's impacted you, your relationships afterward? So can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I think right after it happened, there was a lot of, I turned on myself and turned inward and was like, what did I do? There was like this idea kind of back before this positive shift that we're seeing that, what did she wear? What did she say? And that was really prominent around the time that I was going through what I went through. And so I ended up getting medically retired because I was crashing out in every version possible, right? I went through this period of self-hatred, I saw myself as dirty. I didn't think that I could be loved, that I was like, now I was dirty in a way that nobody else would want me. And so I did 9.5 years of very rigorous therapy. And in therapy is where I learned that it can be yes up until the point that it's not, and then it's not anymore. And that healed me in a way that I could never put into words. It shifted my entire perspective. And then I launched into this journey of forgiving myself for all the years that I spent, wanting to commit suicide and suicide attempts and just thinking that I was dirty and it was somehow my fault. And that it was okay. It wasn't my fault. And that I was worthy of love and there was nothing dirty about me. And I wasn't going to give him that power anymore.
Good for you. So you needed to know that it wasn't your fault, that you had not contributed to this.
It took me 9 years to get there, but I got
But
there.
you got there. That's the
Yeah.
important thing, that you got there. Yeah. Was the Navy helpful at all in ensuring you received some kind of care or therapy? Or did you have to pursue that on your own after?
They were. I did all of my therapy through the VA. So, which is like after, the service. But I had good doctors in service. I feel like they did care about me, and
That's good.
I think they did everything they could to try and get me to a place where at first they wanted me to get over it, right? So I could be a functional member of the service. But once that wasn't happening, I feel like they did right by me.
Good, good.
I'm grateful for
Aisha,
that.
Are Nicole's feelings and the aftermath pretty typical for
Absolutely.
those who've been?
Yeah. So sometimes it can be immediate, sometimes it can be later, but they're like, well, if I hadn't walked home alone, if I hadn't worn that, if I wasn't friendly that day, and like maybe like replaying everything versus ever thinking that it's that person's fault. And that just takes a long time, as you know, in therapy, of like someone saying it's not your fault. There is no clause, and even, what I love again about our younger generation is you need enthusiastic yes. No answer does not necessarily mean consent. And even if you're married, whatever, healthy relationship, anytime you should just check in. Like even my husband, like, hey, can I hug you? And we're like, yeah. And like, that's also teaching my kiddo that like, you can just ask, or, hey, can I have a sip of your water? Like basic things. And that people need to know that that's something you need to be doing all the time. And I think also knowing that it doesn't like take away a magical moment because you check in with someone is what you're doing okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What stood out to me in our conversation is that you don't let labels define who you are, right? So on the flip side of that, our question is, has trauma showed up in your life after this experience? Because I know that, again, some individuals prefer the word survivor. You had mentioned to us that it was an experience for you. But in terms of trauma, in the 9.5 years of therapy, have you dealt with this trauma, and how has it showed up in your life?
Yes, it absolutely does show up in my life in every single way possible. An experience I had today was walking around a store, and there was an individual who was walking, and I just have to remember that one person who did something bad to me, it's unfair for me to hold someone else accountable for what one individual did to me. Now, it's not to say that I wasn't right for being concerned or nervous, but I think it's really important for me in my healing is finding that line in the sand where it's like, okay, it's okay to be aware of your surroundings and be concerned, right? Because you've seen the worst in humanity or close enough to the worst. But also healing through that part of me that thinks danger is at every corner, right? I think that in having kids, I don't want to teach my children to be afraid to exist and to live. And if I want to see that change in them, I have to be the one to let them see it.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you brought up kids, because Lolita did share that you have 2 kids and that your daughter was instrumental in helping. So can you talk about your daughter's inspiration and how she's helped you through all of this?
in the light of experiencing trauma in the military, I experienced a similar trauma in my childhood. And I feel that I was failed by a lot of people in my life as a child. And so I held my little baby in my arms, and when I saw her face, there was nothing that I wouldn't do to be her voice and to make sure that she didn't experience the same disappointments that I had experienced, because I know what it felt like as a child to not be heard and to feel alone and feel like when I did say something, it was brushed under the rug or whatever they decided to do with it, right? I promised her and me that I would be brave and I would talk about it, and it wouldn't matter who agreed, who saw that person differently than I did, that if somebody did something wrong, I was not going to allow them to take her voice or mine.
Good for you.
Yeah,
Good for
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aisha was just mentioning how we should ask for consent in even a sip of water. I think you said, right? Can I have a sip of water? How are you either now or will soon? Your daughter is 8, is that correct? How are you now or in the future, will you teach her about consent, about boundaries?
Have been
Have
doing
you?
the exact same thing.
Yeah.
That it's important that if she has a drink and someone else wants her drink, that they don't have the right to take her drink, that they don't have the right to do anything to her, hug her, that she has the right to say no, and that her voice matters.
When you
And
talk
she
about
needs to
your
use it
daughter-
responsibly.
When you talk about your daughter, your face lights up. Are you guys close?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
My kids are my life.
Oh, and your son is 6?
5.
5. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's
those are
like
good
changing a culture with our kids of just like, everyone's like, hey, give me a hug. And then someone will say, make sure you hug that kid. It's like, no, we don't, no. And, other times like, well, you need to say sorry also because that could push you. And it's like, no, we're good. And so I think it's making these things normal. I mean, even as a little tiny baby, like, hey, sweetie, I need to change your diaper. She's a baby. She can't say yes, but like encouraging that. Or, one thing with my nephews who are a little older than my kiddo is playing a consent game through tickling. So I'll be like, hey, can I tickle you? They're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, okay, let me tickle you. I'm like, well, you want me to stop? They say stop. And they're like, stop. And like, when you want me to go again, say go. And so like just teaching them that this thing, and like it's just fun for them.
Yes.
And so like just like that stuff just starts at the beginning. So shifting this culture that like all these things can, and for example, let's say with my kiddo, I'm like, didn't ask, hey, can I tickle you? I'll apologize. I wanted a hug and you clearly showed some language. I'm like, okay, sweetie, I'm sorry. She's on me too. But like the point is shifting this culture, and that then we can expect this from kids, we can expect this from adults.
Yeah. And it really is a culture shift, isn't it? I mean, so a lot of people from my age, for example, when you had a kid, they say, oh, let me hold your baby. And just as you're taking your baby, right? Without actually asking and waiting for a response. And it is good that we have gotten into this era where consent is necessary and it's expected. And, abiding by that is expected. So that's good. That's really good.
Really good. That's really good. We know that a lot of sexual assault cases happen on college campuses throughout the country. It's something that's often talked about. So when thinking about that, and thinking about our students that may otherwise not share what has happened to them, what kind of advice would you give to someone that has heard your story, or even who may know someone that's gone through it? What kind of advice would you give to them?
Oh, man, that's a loaded question.
Yeah. Okay, let's start with the part one. Just, for someone that has experienced something similar to your story, what advice would you give to them? Because you spoke out about it.
I did.
And you continue to share your story.
I do.
So, what would you share with someone who is just holding it inside, but that's struggling? What kind of hope would you give to them?
I think that I feel like it's hard to give advice, right? Because it's such a different experience for everyone. The aftermath and the effects of the experience are also to varying degrees. What I hope to accomplish in talking about it is this: when I went through it, I had this like deep cellular feeling that I was alone. And how could I talk about it if no one else understood what I was going through? Because I felt alone. And what I learned is that I'm far from alone, which is really awful, right? That should not be a thing. But also it was somewhat, and I say this loosely, but comforting to be able to talk about what I had went through with other people who had been through similar experiences. And although our experiences were not, identical, they had overlapping, scenarios or situations or consequences, whichever. There was they could relate to me and I could relate to them in a way that we had experienced something similar, and maybe the way that it affected us, it was similar. And so when I kind of reached that conclusion that keeping it in was harming me mentally, and my body was exhausted from trying to keep it in, it became very freeing for me. And it also became kind of like a beacon of hope that what I experienced was awful and it was unfair and it shouldn't have happened. But now I get to talk about it and I get to give someone else just a moment to be like, I'm not alone. And that's really important to me.
That is very important. I think the statistics are 1 in 5 females experience sexual trauma. And that's scary. That's really scary. What if someone, Aisha, has a friend or knows someone who experienced some form of sexual trauma, and that person isn't ready to report it, or they're unsure what to do? I mean, I think a lot of people have friends who want to do something, but they don't know what to do. Any advice?
Yeah. So I think one thing is finding resources, which we'll mention in the show, about where to talk to someone. So one place I love is Safe House Center. So I actually work with them doing their anti-racist training. And so folks are eligible for services if they work in Washtenaw County, live in Washtenaw County, go to school in Washtenaw County, or the assault occurred in Washtenaw County, and talking with them about what your options are. Because sometimes there's this pressure like, well, if you don't report, if you don't go to the hospital, you can't change your mind about that, but also helping folks be empowered that whatever feels right to them right now and getting those services. So if someone talks to a therapist as well, that therapist can just sit with them and just be a container for their feelings, because as therapists, we only report if it's a risk of harm to others or themselves. So if a client were to tell me that they were assaulted, I do not need to report that unless there's some sort of like different scenario. So I think for folks who want to help because they don't know how to help and they think maybe I want them to have all the options, so we should go report, we should get going to the hospital, and helping people get back their power, because when they're assaulted, they may not feel any power. So just letting them be there.
Yeah, and you certainly understand feeling powerless.
Absolutely.
Until you took it back. And when you tell your story, you regain your power.
I did,
right?
yes.
Yeah, I love that. What if I'm a mandatory reporter as a professor here? So if a student tells me they were assaulted, I have an obligation, a legal obligation to report it. What is that like? But what if the student was only confiding in me and didn't want that to happen? What do you have? What advice, first of all, can you tell them what that process is like so that they know? Because maybe there's someone they would confide in who was not a mandatory reporter, because it's important that they have some kind of support, right? So
Yep.
recommendations.
Yep. Perfect. So university employees, so faculty, staff, grad assistantship, I'm assuming also student workers are mandated reporters. And I believe CAPS is not mandated reporting because it's therapy. And so what I tell my students, regardless of what reporting situation will look like in my syllabus, I say, I want you to have as much power as possible. So I don't need to name things. I don't need to give specific dates or times. And I want you, if I ever had a report, to read what it is. And I want you to feel like you have a part in this process, because I don't want it to be just something looming out there. And so when you report, Title IX office will follow up with you if they want to. If there's a name listed for the person, they will follow up with that person, and they want to offer resources. Something that I really appreciate about the Access and Opportunity Office is when I talked with Dwight Hamilton a few years ago about this mandated reporting and how, as a therapist, like, it looks very different, and how I feel like it just is complex. And he was saying, well, it's helpful for us to have this data. And the other thing is helping folks get connected. And one of the things he does really well is getting out in the community. So if something gets reported to his office, it's not this ominous place. It's Dwight, who you see at BB Queer, where you see I'm at Enlighten U, and you're like, oh, I know this person really cares about me. Because there's really horrible stories at other universities where they report, and 20 years later, you have some thing on the media of a horrible event happening because it was hush hush. And so I know if I need to report to Title IX, I know Dwight there, and I know Dwight cares about our students.
Yeah. So I know that you've been in 9.5 years of therapy, and that this has been quite the experience in your healing journey. So can you talk about where you're at today?
Yeah, so I did a lot of therapy. And then after about the 9.5 years, I kind of reached a place where I was kind of okay. And just like anything, healing is like an onion, right? There's tons and tons of layers. And each time I feel like I've hurdled, there's 3 more ahead that I have to, unpack at a deeper level. So I took a break for a while, and I went back into therapy last year. I did 12 to 16 weeks of like CBT, to try and
CBT. What's CBT?
cognitive behavioral therapy,
Oh,
to
got
really
it.
try
Okay.
and sharpen my coping skills. I'm a lot better now, where I'm not afraid to ask for help. I'm not afraid to say like, hey, I need to deal with this again, right? This is a lifelong journey of trying to process. So
And trust people again, right?
yeah,
Right.
absolutely. It damaged a lot. So I'm better now. I've reached a point where I see my beauty again.
Good. You are beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So are you. I know that I deserve love, and I deserve to be loved, and I deserve someone who respects my boundaries, someone who will hear my story and not see it as a vantage point that I'm weak and I can be taken advantage of. I'm pretty steadfast in my in who I am now. So lots of therapy really, really helped. Relationships, I think, just also an onion, many, many layers. I'm going through a divorce, so it has, it plays a significant role, right? And I think that what's really amazing is that the therapy that I went through that healed this piece, this experience, also helped me start to heal me. And so when I started to heal me and I started to see my beauty again, and I started to see and believe that I was worthy of healthy love, considerate love, that I wasn't going to settle ever again. So I'm on a hiatus of relationships. It's all about me right now.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, that's important. So what made you decide to come to EMU? And it sounds like what you're doing here is amazing. So we definitely want to hear about that.
I originally came back to school because I asked for a divorce, and I looked at my life where I was a stay-at-home mom for 5 years, and I built this foundation in my babies that I was very, very proud of. And then I shifted. I pivoted my perspective, and I said, okay, I need to do something, right? I don't want to teach my daughter that she should be financially dependent on her partner, right? Not that there's anything wrong with that. If you have it and it's good and it's healthy, that's amazing. But it doesn't always work out. And so you always have to make sure that you're taken care of. And I didn't do that until I did. So I shifted and I ended up at WCC. I got my associate's degree, and I met a incredible professor there who works at EMU. She is wonderful, and she's the reason that I'm here today. So
Call her out. What's her name? Let's give her some props. Who is it?
Professor Labadie.
Wow.
She's
Good.
amazing.
So what are you studying here at EMU?
I'm studying clinical laboratory sciences, and I am going to get my bachelor's to be a medical laboratory scientist. I want to do autopsies.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yep.
That's
pretty cool.
incredible.
I'm very passionate about being a voice for people who don't have one, right? And I think that it's easy to see a patient that's deceased as someone who's just deceased, but they're so much more than that. They were people. They have a family. They have people that loved them. And I think they deserve the same care and respect and dignity that living patients get. So
Good for you. Good for you. And you will be a good one. You'll get one. Before we wrap up, I want to go to you and ask you a little bit about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that was so instrumental in Nicole's healing. What is it? And why is it so?
Perfect. Yeah. So CBT is like this very traditional therapy. And what it's helping you do is reframe your thoughts. So you have this thought in this example, I'm not worthy, and you need to replace it and reframe it with another thought. You also may have distortions of like, maybe this has happened a lot of times. Like, there's no way this will not happen with another person. And then it's like, let's change that thought, that we now have tools, and maybe even changing the thought that if it does happen again, we can deal with that when that arises. And so it's really helpful to just think about, here's a list of thoughts. Because sometimes we're like, we have all, and like, nope, they're like in these like pockets of categories. So it may be black and white thinking. It's either this person's good, this person's bad, or catastrophizing, where the worst things are always going to keep happening, or generalizing it to everything. And so seeing like the themes, the therapist can help you be like, hey, did you ever notice that in this area it's always black and white, but over here, like, you have a lot of strengths, so you don't see that area in black and white. And so you get to know yourself. And so you can't control the thought that pops in, but you can control this other thought that happens. And so with changing your thoughts, you can change your behavior.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And that's exactly what you
It is.
experienced.
Yes,
right?
it was incredible. And
Good.
it does work.
Good.
If you
good.
do the work.
if you do the work.
I had a lot
right?
of homework.
Good. Very good. Any last thoughts, anyone?
So what I like when I was speaking with my therapist about what I was going through, because I was dealing with many different scenarios of assault, that person had told me that it's actually pretty common for someone who's been a victim once to be a victim, like to be a repeated victim.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
I'd have like look it up, but yeah, it can be definitely repeat violence by other people. So that could be a history of like not knowing that you can say no, or thinking like these things are all right, or perpetrators looking for folks who maybe need more financial support. So there's a wheel called the power control wheel, which will be like, oh, is your housing, your employment at risk? Do they get you a gift after every time and say sorry? And like this history of thing. Are they a vulnerable person for whatever reason? And so these things can increase the risk that someone may be at risk of being assaulted. I think we didn't talk about this, but also I think there's a myth that folks in same-sex relationships don't experience it, which is not true. Also, like queer and trans, particularly Black trans women, often assaulted. And so knowing that this can happen across different genders, and people are like, well, you can't be assaulted by a man if you're a man, like that's just not true. Or it has to look like penis, vagina, penetration, like that's just not true. And so just knowing that it, if it didn't feel right for you, that is assault.
I have a quick question for you, Aisha. So with students who are struggling, with sharing their story, if they have had an experience like this, what kind of advice would you give to students for speaking out?
Yeah, I think it starts with sharing with yourself of what happened. And for some folks, they want to share in public spaces. Some folks, they don't. And I think sometimes our culture is like, oh, you got to do this thing. Or if you don't report it, what if it happens to somebody else? And how are you going to feel? And right now, you got to take care of yourself and what that looks like. And so maybe you don't want to share a professor, but you want to share the spoken word in different ways that help you talk about that. Maybe you want to share online and be anonymous. I just think there's ways that can be healing for you, and like figuring out what that looks like. And I think it starts with being like, this was sexual assault and I did not want this. I did not deserve this. I did not cause this. And like that can be reporting to yourself, like your own feelings.
So reporting to yourself. I like that. Thank you. In case they want to seek some help on campus, where can they go? We'll have a lot of different resources on the screen, but what are
so
some
always
of them?
Counseling and Psychological Services, CAPS, our counseling clinic, and then our community behavioral health clinic.
Thank you. Nicole, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak about my experiences, and I really hope that it helps somebody
It will. Trust us.
find their way
Yeah.
through.
And thank
The
you for
mess.
sharing it. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm really glad that our entire team decided to wear these teal ribbons to support Nicole and other sexual assault survivors, with April being Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you brought it to our attention too, because the color, of course, symbolizes so much. And to me, and to all of us, it symbolizes Nicole's courage to tell her story.
She's very courageous.
Yeah, she is.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Enlighten U. This was one of those episodes that wasn't fun, but it was necessary. We hope Nicole's bravery in sharing her story helped you.
You know, I'm often stunned by how unwell people are and how they harm others. It's really sad. If you have experienced assault or know someone who has, support is available. The resources on the screen include confidential options, and for those who choose it, information about reporting. You get to decide what support looks like for you. Well, that's it for this one. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening to Enlighten U. And please, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share it with others. Y'all be good to yourselves and be good to one another.